Today, our topic is on ethical AI in social work with Jonny Hoyle. Jonny is a frontline fellow and a social work leader in North Yorkshire, where he is the development lead. Jonny's work has seen him developing and implementing new technologies in the pursuit of ensuring that social workers in North Yorkshire spend as much time as possible in the places that they can do the most good, which is directly with children and their families. So I'll hand over to Jonny for today's presentation.
Thanks, Ross, and good to see you all today. Good to see some friendly faces, familiar faces in the audience. I'm hoping to talk to you a bit about some of the ways that we've been using new technologies to improve the service that we can offer to children, young people, and to their families. And I guess I wanted to title the session "Ethical Uses of AI in Social Work" because I think it's really important for us to remember that technology can do loads of things, but the challenge for us as social workers is to think about what should it do rather than what could it do. And so I've got a couple of pieces of technology that I'm going to share with you that we've been developing and thinking about that hopefully fit alongside our social work values. So I'm going to share my screen. The first piece of technology that I want to share with you is this. We had an idea that we wanted to bring together all of the information about children that we hold and put it into one place. What that means is rather than social workers having to flip between different pots of information to find the right pieces of information, we could easily give people access to it. So I'm going to talk you through it. I'm aware that of time and wanting to show you all of this work, so it will feel like a whistle-stop tour. I want you to try and keep in mind this Ferris wheel. So this Ferris wheel is representative of the average number of relationships a child's got on our system if they're in care. And it's really important to remember that we've artificially inserted two people into there because the child's got two foster carers. So keep that in mind because it will become important as we go along. What we've been able to do is our systems, Liquid Logic System C, and we've been able to bring together all of the information that's in case notes, all of the information that's in the form section, and all of the information that's in the document section. What this is a visual timeline of interactions. Now, currently, how do you know if your plan's working? How do you know if things are starting to go wrong or if a family needs extra support? This visual timeline will start to show you interactions, will start to show you what's happening on a child's record. If you can see this period here where things are starting to increase, it might be an indication that the family needs more support. And if you can put the right support in at this point, can you avoid these key stressors, these key times where a crisis happens or where something really difficult happens? Can we start to move towards being more proactive than reactive as a service? The other thing, I share this with people, and anybody that's not had to complete a chronology, this is generally lost on those people. But I remember the days as a social worker of having a Word document open and trying to cross-reference between case notes, forms, and documents to create a chronology. What we've done is because we've pulled together those three pots of data, we've created one scrollable timeline. So if you're a social worker completing a chronology, all you need to do is scroll down. You will find the key pieces of information. You don't need to go clicking between the different sources of data. The main event is this. I call it the Facebook wall because what we've done is we've pulled together case notes, forms, and documents. We've given you the ability to search everything all at the same time. If I was to say to you, choose a child's record and find me every reference to alcohol, you won't be able to do it. You would need hours, potentially days. What we know is that you can search some parts of the system, you can't search other parts of the system. What we've been able to do, because we can pull it all together, is I can take you through the 35 references. I can do that for immunisations. I can do that for GCSE results. I can do that around domestic abuse or court hearings. We've not lost anything by doing this, except wasting people's time. That all that time that a social worker spends trying to find those pieces of information is effectively wasted time. Because we've been able to do that, what that means is you can not only find the information, but you can also see the context that it's talked about in. You can still use your professional judgment. You can still read and understand what was happening. But the other thing that we've just started to explore is whether or not there is space for large language models. Because we're bringing all of this data together, if I ask Copilot and cross my fingers to provide me a summary of this child's record, you'll see that Copilot will just go and read everything and will bring you back a summary alongside references of what's happened. So all those periods of time where somebody updates the last case summary with the new information, actually potentially you don't need to do that. What you need to do is just make sure it's in the right place on the system, and then we can start to explore how large language models might be able to help us save time. If I had more time, I would show you you can ask it questions like, tell me about the most recent safety plan, read this child's entire record and give me a list of strengths and protective factors. And because large language models are brilliant at reading and understanding huge amounts of information, what that means is you don't then need to spend the time going and looking for key piece of information. Instead, you can spend your time working out what you're going to do with it. So remember this Ferris wheel. This Ferris wheel is representative of what our system thinks a child's relationships are. But we always knew that that wasn't representative of children's networks. We always knew this missed out dinner ladies, it missed out football coaches, it missed out next door neighbours, or a child's friends and their friends' parents, all of the people that you might want to involve in a plan to help keep children safe, all the people that you might want to talk to about potentially caring for a child if they can't continue to live at home. If these are the only people that you've got to go off, you're limiting your options. So what we did, because we were bringing all of this information together, is we've used AI to read every single word that's been written about a child and to automatically generate an eco map of people. And what that looks like is that we've gone from this to this, an actual representation of a child's network. What we found is up to 950% more people than when we performed a manual test of children's records. And by manual, I don't mean looking at the relationships tab. I mean setting off a social worker and saying, go and create me an eco map from the information. The beauty of this is that there's zero additional effort required from a social work workforce that is already busy and already stretched. This is technology taking and reading that information and presenting it to you so that you can do something with it. And our working logic is we would much rather a social worker spends an hour exploring this map than spends an hour creating an eco map for a child or a family. We're developing a tool, again, to read all of the words that are written about children and to start to identify locations. And we think that that's really important, especially if you consider children that go missing from care, when you consider exploitation, but also when you start to consider if children can't continue to live at home, who are these people? Are these people that can help us? Are these people that are connected to a child that we can involve, that we can talk to about caring for a child? So that's our knowledge mining work. You'll see on all of these tabs, there are a variety of sliders. What we wanted to do is to give social workers ultimate control over what they see. You can select a date range and only see information from that date range. You can choose to see people, places, products. You can narrow that down depending on what your use case is. And we've also incorporated what we call a confidence score. And the idea of a confidence score is that if you want it to be really specific and say, only show me people that you know are definitely people, you can say that. But if you start to want to widen the net a little bit, you might expand that and increase the number of people. That would include, for example, if somebody had spelled my name wrong, if somebody had made traditional typos, increasing the confidence score basically widens the net. The second piece of work that I want to show you is what we call the policy buddy. Now, the policy buddy is built on the idea exactly like ChatGPT. It is built on ChatGPT 4. Some of the difficulties around large language models is that they read such a huge amount of information. If you're asking ChatGPT 4 to give you information or advice about safeguarding children, you're going to end up with some results from the USA. You're going to end up with some results from Australia or Japan, and you will end up with some in the UK, even if you tell it you want UK-based information. And so we've worked with the brilliant team at Engine to develop this North Yorkshire policy buddy. What it does is it takes all of the features from ChatGPT 4. So it gives you the ability to communicate with it in the same way that you can with ChatGPT 4. But the only reference material that it will look at is national legislation and North Yorkshire specific policies and procedures. When we started on this journey, we had a hypothesis that most people in social work, if they didn't know the answer to a question, that they would ask each other, they would ask their colleagues. After that, we thought they would probably ask their supervisor, their practice educator, their manager, and maybe after exploring both of those avenues, they might go and find the policy and read what the policy says. And the reason for that is often that we've got policies stored in a document store somewhere that are tricky to navigate, that can be difficult for social workers to go and have the time to read and digest. And then the other element, which is, as humans, what we do is, if you're looking for a piece of information and you think you've found it, then you stop looking. But large language models and AI are brilliant at saying, well, I'm going to read everything and just check in case there's different references in different places. So this is the policy buddy. We thought that it had multiple uses. The first and most obvious one was for new staff, newly qualified social workers, as a bit of a help and an aid. It will never get tired of you asking it questions, so you never have to worry about, I've already been to my supervisor twice and I don't want to go a third time. It will provide you information in whatever way you want it to. If you say, give me bullet points, it will give you bullet points. So I've pre-selected some questions just for the ease of time. I guess the other couple of use cases that I want to touch on are if you're a senior manager with multiple areas of responsibility, it's impossible to know the detail of all of those areas, and actually having access to something like a policy buddy can really help you explore the areas you're responsible for. And then the third and probably the most popular use of the policy buddy has been to help our colleagues that have neurodiversity needs, because it really can shape and present information in the way that you find helpful. So you see here, I've given it a question. I've said I'm a newly qualified social worker. I'm going to do my first ever statutory visit to a child that's got a child protection plan, and asked it what I need to do. It goes and it reads the national legislation, it reads our policies and procedures, and it gives you a really comprehensive breakdown of what you need to think about before, during, and after the visit. Not only that, But when I talk to you about trying to find policies and procedures can be difficult, it also tells you where it's found its information. So if you want to read the policy, you can just press on the document. It references all of its answers, and you can press and see where it's got its information from. So I remember being a newly qualified social worker, and I remember a family asking me this question. The child had a child protection plan, and the family wanted to go on holiday to Greece. And I didn't know the answer to the question. They wanted to know, are they allowed to go, and what has to happen to make that work? What that resulted in for me was going back to the office, saying to the family, I don't know, but I'll find out, and then going to find out, having to ask people, and then going back to the family. A whole host of time that wasn't valuable to anybody in that situation. Having access to something like the policy buddy, it can break that down for you and give you an answer that you're confident about. It's not looking at the United States, it's not looking at Australia, it is only looking at UK national legislation and our North Yorkshire policies and procedures. I guess some of the more significant benefits are when you've got really tricky situations where there's competing pieces of legislation. And so I've pre-selected this question. I've asked it about a care leaver who's 21, they've got disabilities, and they get services from the adult service. They've got some issues around claiming benefits and a mixture of physical health and mental health needs. And I'm asking it what needs to go into the pathway plan. So we're cross-referencing huge pieces of different legislation. Because of how large language models are constructed, it can go and read and understand all of that complexity and can help you to make sense of it. And so just before this call, we had a conversation about to what extent is using AI cheating, and to what extent is using AI almost having an extra critical friend, a colleague that's always got time to answer your questions. And for us, using something like the policy buddy, we think really offers that critical friend who can sit and consider all of the things that you haven't got the time to go and read and understand in depth, and can help you with your decision making. The other key bit that it's really good at, and it takes this from the kind of generic ChatGPT-4 element, are bespoke answers. So if I'm a social worker working with an 8-year-old boy who doesn't know what to expect from the looked after review process, I can say to it, make me a guide. This young person really likes superheroes, so use that as a theme. If I was a social worker trying to create that, I could probably spend 45 minutes trying to create that. What the policy buddy does is it takes all of those things that ChatGPT-4 is really good at, and it drafts in, well, this is the looked after review process, and this is how I'm going to incorporate superheroes into it. So you can see it's actively referencing superheroes. Imagine you're a superhero on a superhero mission. Who's going to be there? Well, you're the most important. Think of your social worker as a sidekick. I love that idea for a young person who might be feeling daunted by all of these processes. Think of your carer as being the superhero mentor. You can do this about football players. You could do this about Marvel comics. You could do it about whatever you want. Instead of that taking me 45 minutes, you've just seen it's taken me all of about 5 seconds. And I've got a really good first draft that I can give to a young person that they know relates to them and the things that they like. A really personalized response. I guess, whilst I say to you, as a social worker, this might take me 45 minutes to do, if I was to do that manually, the reality is I probably don't have 45 minutes. And so I probably give the 8-year-old boy some generic information about a looked after review. But utilizing and having access to something like this that you can be confident about, you know it's giving you the right information because it's only reading your documents. Having something that can support you and your colleagues in the ways that you want, in the learning styles that you've got, can improve your confidence, can improve the service that you offer, and ultimately being able to do all of this stuff much quicker than the traditional way means that you can offer a much better service to children, young people, and their families. Now, I can't show you this, but using this technology alongside your case management system, you can effectively split your screen. You can have your case management system up on the left-hand side, and you can have the policy buddy up on the right-hand side, and you can interact with both at the same time. Using this technology, you can, here in North Yorkshire, you can access it on your mobile phone. You could speak into your phone and ask the questions, and you can have the policy buddy answer you verbally, again, meaning that you can do it there and then. If a family asks you to a question that you don't know the answer to, you can answer it there and then. Have a look, write the answer. The other and last thing that I want to show you is one of the other things that large language models are brilliant at is being able to translate. So my first language is English, and so I will interact with it in English. But if the 8-year-old boy is Spanish, I can ask it to translate the document into Spanish. You can see from the English that it is the same structure. You can ask it to do that in, a variety of hundreds of languages, but again means, firstly, you can be confident that the information is what you want it to be because you can see the English version. But secondly, you can provide a really personalized service because you can present that to somebody in their language of choice. Similarly, if you're a social worker and English isn't your first language, you can still interact with the national legislation and your organisation's policies and procedures in your chosen language. So that is my run through of 2 key pieces of technology. I guess what I would want to say is to keep in mind our information is probably just about the most sensitive of all information that organizations hold, and it is super important that we continue to think about the ethics around AI. The second part is that people talk about AI as if it's the future and as if people are waiting for it to come. AI is the present. People are using and interacting with AI now. And for me, organizations have got to get on board and help shape the direction of AI because it's here and it's here to stay. I think the last part is the bit that I opened with. Instead of thinking about AI as being, what can it do? I think as a profession, what we've got to do is think about what should it do, and then we've got to utilize it for those. And I've obviously shown you two of our pieces of work. So I'm looking forward to some questions if people have got them. Ross, do you want me to pick?
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, Jonny, thank you so much for that presentation. I think really detailed and you took us through it really, really well to get us an understanding of what's happening in North Yorkshire. The first question I think is from Darren, which I think questions kind of where you might use this and where could you apply it. So the questions around kind of using it in therapeutical life story work and could you see it be used in that setting?
Yeah, absolutely, Darren. I definitely would. And I think one of the things that worries me is about children's access to records as is, because, generally they are historical documents written in that context and can be really, really difficult. People from the care experience communities tell us how difficult and traumatic reading their records are. I think because of how AI works, taking such a huge amount of information and being able to tell it to therapeutically answer a question could be a really massive development for us. Equally, what I'd like is eventually that access to records is accessed via something like the policy buddies by some generative AI, where young people can say, why was I in care? And technology can go and answer that question rather than the current process, which is I've got to ask for access to all of these heavily redacted, difficult documents just to find the answer to key questions.
Great, thanks, Jonny. And we've got a number of questions, so apologies if I don't pick out yours. But just, I suppose there's a question around the kind of confidence factor of its interpretation from Stuart in terms of, how do we ensure that there's an approach that's used to give us that confidence?
Yeah, well, we tested it alongside humans, and in terms of what the tool brings through, the tool only brings through the raw information. So it's not changed from if you went and read the case note. The case note and what you see in the tool are both exactly the same. The only thing that it does do is it interprets, having read all of that information, I'm going to separate people, places, and products to display on the eco map. And hopefully, what you saw from the visualization is that it does a much better job than humans do. And I guess the question for us is, do we want social workers spending their time trying to find and lose people? Because we do lose people over time. We do lose children's relationships with their friends if they move area, with their friends' parents, with youth workers, with football coaches, with dance teachers. Do we want social workers to spend their time doing that, or could technology do that? And instead, social workers can spend their time working out, is this person someone that I can bring in to help? Is this somebody that I can help this child stay connected to or reconnect to? Are these people that we can use to help keep this child safe, or people that we could talk to if if that child can't continue to live at home anymore?
I mean, there's a follow-up question perhaps, which kind of asks around kind of that the human judgment of like say a social worker doing that, and kind of how well do you think it's able to judge what the most important bits of information are? But I'm suggesting that it's giving you lots of information and then you'd still have to analyze that information. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but I also think it's really important for us to remember that we're not swapping a perfect system for an imperfect system. We have an imperfect system now. We have narratives that we build over time. We have, somebody creates a summary of a child for their case note summary, and actually what you're doing is building on somebody else's impressions. There are still some issues around our biases. There are still some issues around how we capture and record information. And going back to Darren's point about can information that we capture and store be more therapeutic? We've, as a profession, got a long way to go. What we've found is that there's been no significant deviation or difficulty from the AI generated content because it is still taking the social workers' notes and records.